Welcome to HCS Talks. I am your host, Superintendent of Hampton City Schools, Raymond Haynes. This is our Hampton City Schools podcast. It is designed to educate, inform, and hopefully entertain our community and beyond. We talk a lot about different topics related to education, students, teachers, support staff, parents, programs and initiatives, community partnerships, and more. So we hope you will stay tuned and keep listening to HCS Talks. Today I have the privilege to sit down with Dr. Adolph Brown III, who is an urban and rural school educator, author, research scientist, businessman, and keynote speaker. He has also delivered some powerful messages to our high school students over the years. So, Dr. Brown, thank you for being a guest on HCS Talks. I'm certainly looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Haynes.
All right. So why don't we begin, Dr. Brown, by having you tell the listening audience a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself, share your profession, personal and educational background as well.
Sure. I've worked with Hampton City Public Schools for many years, and I got to say that it's been a privilege for me. And the privilege that it's been is that I've been able to share not only education, but I've been able to share my life experiences. And two of the most important things that I hope I communicate to the students, the parents, and guardians of Hampton City Public Schools is the fact it's not how you start, it's how you finish.
Yes, sir.
And the other is to let parents know that it starts at home. Schools cannot do it alone. And that's the message that I have pretty much lived and learned. So my story in a nutshell, my mom and dad divorced after many years, and we went from a middle-class lifestyle to inner-city poverty overnight. And I say poverty, but I got to admit that I had teachers that understood that poverty wasn't a disability.
Right.
Just like here in Hampton.
Right.
So those teachers still held me to high standards. You know, they didn't lower the standards based on where I was coming from. They knew what I needed to be. So I think as educators, and I hope sometimes that educators are listening when I'm addressing the students and the parents and guardians, but it's important to understand that high achievement is framed in high expectations. But parents need to do that too, as well as educators. So I was held to a high standard.
Regardless of your circumstances.
Regardless of them. Went to, with the first person in my family of 5 to graduate high school as the middle child, and didn't know what I was going to do. In fact, I tell students all the time not to be afraid. And the reason I tell them not to be afraid, because I was scared to death. I didn't know it seemed like everybody knew what they were going to do after high school.
Yes. Because
they had people in their families that were doing it.
Yes.
I was the first person to graduate high school. So I tell students all the time that the 3E approach, which your district does so well.
Yes, sir.
Prepare students for life and learning. So I say 3E. They can be employed. They can go straight to work. And in today's economy, not too bad. They can go to work. They can be employed. They can be enlisted.
Right.
Our armed services.
Right.
They can be enrolled. Junior college, community college, 4-year, technical. There's so many things. So that's where, and I got that from my school counselor. My school counselor, Mrs. Delna Antaki, who said to me that my SAT scores or my grade point average were good enough that I could have the school pay for me to go to college.
Wow.
Well, I'd never heard of that. Again, this is all new to me. You know, all the things that schools have today that are exposing children to what's after school, didn't have that. I considered what you're doing today, the academies you have today, phenomenal. So I didn't have that. So I was scared. So she told my mom that she wanted me to look at the College of William and Mary and Princeton University. I was afraid, but those were the two schools that said it would be paid for me. My granddad, farmer in Wakefield, Virginia, was the only person that had a problem with the College of William and Mary because he's always joking. He said, I know my son is smart and all, but can you tell me how he can go to 2 colleges at the same time? William and Mary. So
William and Mary.
Exactly. So because of, believe it or not, because of its proximity. That's how it wasn't because I thought it was the best college or I didn't know anything.
Right.
But it came down to my mom saying that if you go to New Jersey, you may not be able to come home all the time. That was a big deal for me.
Yes, yes.
So Williamsburg.
Not too far.
Exactly.
Not too far.
So went to William and Mary and ended up majoring in psychology and anthropology. Psychology primarily because when my brother was murdered, my brother was murdered when I was 11. And that caused me to make, well, I wouldn't let kids use as an excuse.
Right.
But it was some stuff that I was carrying.
Right. Was he older or younger?
He was older.
Okay.
He was my oldest sibling.
Okay.
19.
Big brother.
Exactly. An only brother. So when he was murdered, I was angry at the world. In fact, I spent nights and days plotting revenge. Just that's what I was carrying. And the principal told my mom that I should talk to someone. So I go to a psychologist. I'm in the office, and this guy never talks. So I'm thinking, this is a ripoff. He never says anything. I'm always the one doing all the talking. But when I leave, I feel better. I do it again. He's still not talking. I'm doing all the talking. And then as I got older, I said, I could probably do that. I could probably do that. So studied psychology, anthropology, minored in education, and went on a master's degree and then doctorate. And I stayed pretty much locally. My doctorate is from Eastern Virginia Medical School.
Okay.
And just my mission in life has always been to give back. To give back. And when I say give back, especially to communities whereby people feel like hope is gone.
Right.
You know, we can have the pedagogy, the educational theories and everything. But unless we can exemplify hope when we stand in front of people,
Yes.
if you look in a child's eyes today, and I see it, that glimmer that we would used to tell parents to protect. Sometimes when I'm looking now, it looks like sometimes there's nothing there. And that concerns me. And I don't know what's going on in their lives. Sometimes I think they're overstimulated. So when I come up, I don't come close to the bar that social media has set.
Exactly.
So I just want to make sure that, first of all, hope is a part of the equation. And secondly, strategies, real strategies. So when I'm combining research with practical examples of how to get there. So what I didn't say today, what I would love to say here on your podcast, is those three things that are the most important as they go through this educational journey. To read, to read, to read.
Yes.
And that, again, the foundation of that is at home. Buy books for your children.
Yes.
Buy books. Well, doctor, they don't like reading. Well, guess what? Ask them what they're interested in and get those books. I can't tell you how many magazines we had come into our home over the years so that our kids would run to the mailbox for those magazines.
Is it something they were interested in?
Exactly.
Yes.
You know what gets your kids' attention?
Yes.
That's half the battle.
Yes.
Because if you know what gets their attention, you also have leverage when you got to reprimand.
Yes. Absolutely.
All I had to do with my oldest son was take one of those muscle and fitness magazines. He dreamed of being on the cover.
Done,
So that's where I am. Was a special education teacher. Thought I was going to end up in administration. However, as I was shadowing, where I was spending more time in meetings than with students. I'm unsure if it happens here, but where I was. So, and then I saw some things in education that, give you an example. I worked with some really good people. We were in each other's weddings. They were godparents of each other's children. Good, solid people that would sometimes say dumb things about kids. And it wasn't like they're bad people. These were my friends, my colleagues. The things that they would say, I could take Johnny, but I can't stand his mama. That's the kind of conversations that would happen sometimes in the teachers' lounges. I decided at that point that I was going to teach teachers. I was going to get educators before they ever got to a classroom. And that's been my career in a nutshell.
It has been a phenomenal career thus far,
Thank you.
should say.
I appreciate
and
that.
You mentioned those 3 E's: enroll, employ, or enlist. It certainly aligns with our whole motto with the Academies of Hampton,
Yes.
ensuring that young people graduate the portrait of a Hampton graduate and ensuring that they are college, career, and life ready.
Come on.
It is a beautiful thing.
Yes.
It is a beautiful thing. Something else you mentioned too, Dr. Brown, you mentioned how you sat down with a psychologist.
Yes.
And how you did all the talking.
Yeah.
And he sat and listened, and you said, I could do that. But it aligns with what we talk about here, too. The me I see is the me I'll be.
Come on.
You saw a person in a position or a profession, and because you were able to experience that, you were saying, that is something I think I can do. So oftentimes we try to expose young people to careers and industries without actually having somebody in their face that's actually doing the work. So the reality of it all, I think it speaks volumes to what we're doing with the Academies of Hampton. Folks like you coming in and engaging with young folks and making it realistic for them and understanding that everyone comes with a story.
That's
Everyone
right.
has a story, and you don't know what people are going through.
Everybody.
But in spite of that, you persevere.
Yes, and what a reason for us all to extend grace.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And you mentioned this, that I don't know if you want to elaborate on why did you decide to go into the field of clinical psychology, and which led you to many other fields of expertise. But before you answer that question, I'm sorry, I meant to ask you about the anthropology. Have you done anything else with that? Or?
Oh, every time I open my mouth.
So what sparked your interest about anthropology?
Well, the professor I met before classes started. And like that psychologist that helped me, this professor was like, so what are you thinking about majoring in? And I said, psychology. And he said, well, have you considered anthropology? I said, I don't know what that is. Come to my office, he said. I went to his office. His name was Dr. Mario Zamora from the Philippines. I got to tell you what happened as a result of my affiliation with him. I met his wife. Can't think of her name. Her last name's Aquino. But he had me give tours to the representatives from the Philippines when they came. I was published as an undergraduate by helping him with the research in cultural anthropology.
Nice.
So again, that power of connecting. You know, we tell teachers about relationships, but that power of connecting. I didn't know what it was. He said, come to my office. Now, guess what? I had a choice. I didn't have to go.
Right.
I went and I listened. So I use anthropology every time I speak. I do a lot of training surrounding issues of psychological safety. We're making sure that every individual feels as if they belong in circumstances and situations, and being able to be themselves and show up authentically in those. Anthropology does more for that than psychology.
Nice. That's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. So your life experiences and the things you've already shared early on in the podcast, is that sort of kind of what sparked your interest into going into clinical psychology, or
Definitely.
What did spark your interest? Spark your interest?
It was. When I tell you, I literally woke up daily thinking about revenge for my brother, going to bed with that on my mind. I understand angry children, and sometimes they're my favorite to work with because I wasn't angry. I was enraged. That's a deeper, darker level.
Yes.
And I had a cousin, and I think I introduced him last year. The cousin and I, first cousins, were on the same path. I mean, we were both upset with what happened to my brother. That psychologist helped me. My cousin ended up having time out. His time out was 24 and a half years in prison. And he's only been home for 2 years. And that was when my wife and I picked him up.
And you two were extremely close.
And stayed extremely close throughout all that time. So the power of mental health. And we're talking more about it today than we ever have. Because what happened, that pandemic, just imagine everybody already had stuff in their backpacks.
Yes.
Everybody. We all carry a second invisible backpack. Some of them to the brim, some not so much, particularly if you take an inventory and unpack it every day.
But it all has an impact on you in some way, shape, or form.
Yes. And what the psychologist helped me understand when I was a kid, that what I was carrying wasn't mine to carry. That my mom, my dad leaving my mom had nothing to do with me.
Right.
I was an egocentric kid thinking, oh, it must have been me.
What did I do wrong?
Exactly. Right. And what the running joke in the community was, I said, I thought it was me because every time I talk to somebody about my dad, they say, oh, yeah, he left right around the time you were born. So, of course, I internalized that.
Right.
My brother's murder, right when the gangs are pulling on me, guess what? I felt he abandoned me. Guess what I learned? That death is actually inconvenient. It doesn't knock on your door and say, hey, get ready, I'm coming back in 3 weeks.
You're right.
So he loved life and he loved me, but yet I was carrying this stuff. There's so many people carrying the weight of the world. Then the pandemic came along. To date, it's the only thing that happened to everybody at the same time all over the world.
Yes.
So that went in people's backpacks. What we're seeing are backpacks overflowing every day because people had such full backpacks. So when you see a restaurant employee throwing a drink in somebody's face, that's a backpack.
Yes.
Everybody's looking to say, what's going on? We're carrying the weight of the world without emptying it. We got to take time and take an inventory. There's a saying that you can't heal what you don't reveal.
Wow.
And in psychology, we say you're only as sick as your secrets. It doesn't mean you go out and blab what you are going through. What it means is you got to know what you're going through. Otherwise, we're going to bleed on people who didn't cut us.
Wow.
And that's what's going on in classrooms. We have students. Reactive attachment disorder, they're saying is almost like 2 out of 3 students that have issues of loss, abandonment, and bereavement because of some relationship long before they get to the teacher. But then teachers have to know not to take it personally.
You're right.
That they didn't do it. This kid, but you got
something else going on that's deeper.
Right. But they got to stay. You got to stay around long enough and show this child that they can't push you away.
Right.
Let them know that regardless of what they do, there's nothing that's going to make you stop loving them.
That's right.
And there's teachers today that say that wasn't in my job description. I tell those teachers, it's not a job anyway. It's a mission.
Wow.
And it's a mission without a finish line. That's what you sign up for.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And you can remember, I can remember, and I tell this story all the time, I can remember my best teachers and the impact they had on me, as well as the worst teachers that I had, and the impact they also had on me. And it was all centered around my thought processes of how they treated me and whether or not they cared and whether or not they instilled a sense of hope in me.
Doc. Doc, I got to tell you, one of the most impactful things I ever did was on my master's degree. We were the first people to actually research empirically the school-to-prison pipeline.
Wow.
Hampton University, Howard University, and the College of William and Mary. My advisor, Dr. Ellen Rosen, we went around the country and interviewed inmates on their experience in public education. When I first started doing master classes, I was horrible because I just wanted to sound the alarm. Mm-hmm. I was getting on stage and saying, you don't know, you don't want this. You know? Exactly. And the stories that I would hear where students would say, my family was homeless and we were moving around, but I couldn't wait to get back to school. I couldn't wait. And then I finally got back to school and my teacher saw me and she looked disappointed that I came back. That's the kind of stuff that I heard in the school-to-prison pipeline study. So when I talk about relationships and the power of relationships, it's so real. They were students that said things like, they remember the teacher high-fiving everybody and would stop before they got to them. So the kind of thing is you don't have time to do it for all, don't do it for just one.
Exactly.
Because students are watching. So that was probably, of all the things I've ever studied, that one, when you ask me about my passion, I know psychology works, not from books, but from my experiences. But that research that I did at my master's level I saw people that didn't necessarily have to be in the situations they were in. They had been given up. People had given up on them in the community. But school is supposed to be different. I should be able to count on school for a smile.
Yes.
I should be able to count on school for love, unconditional love. And for them, sometimes it was worse. So that's the reason. That's what keeps me going. We leave here today and we drive straight to Connecticut.
Wow.
So, I take breaks, but what fuels me is the fact that it's a mission. Just like you. I love what you're doing. I don't know how many of my students came on stage today from your district that are employed in your district.
Quite a few of them.
Exactly. And they tell me the wonderful job that the district's doing. They tell me the wonderful job that you're doing.
Thank you.
And the relationship I have with them, if you weren't, they tell me. Mm-hmm. So I just love the fact
and
that...
because of how they feel they're being treated, they choose to stay.
Yes.
They choose to stay.
Yes. And you can see it in the students. So like I said, I thank you. I don't think your listening audience would know this because a lot of people don't. I turn down more of these than I accept. People want us to do this every single day.
Right.
I have a family, but more importantly, I have grandkids now. and grandkids do things while you're away, and then you get home and hear about it, and they're like, do it again. And they don't do it.
It's not the same.
You missed it. So when you guys call, I always answer because I know the work that you're doing.
Yes, sir.
If there's truly a best practice in our nation, Hampton City Schools, hands down.
We certainly appreciate it, but we know we can't do the great things without the partnerships with folks like you and other folks outside and inside of this community as well. So we can't thank you enough for the impact that you make on our young people on a daily basis as well.
I appreciate that.
So talk a little bit about your affiliation with Hampton City Schools and what it's been like for the past 6 years with us.
Oh, my word. It's been phenomenal. Just watching all the initiatives that not only that you talk about, that you've actually done.
Yes, sir.
It's one thing to have a 5-year strategic plan. It's another thing to actually check it off.
Right. Actually do it.
Exactly. So the fact of the matter is every time I come back, there's something new. The levels just, so I'm comfortable being in an environment of excellence. Excellence elevated, so to speak, because every single year I come back, there's something new that I can talk about. And there's some things that I know the audience appreciates, but every year I try to bring something new.
And you do. So you do. And I've listened to it each year, and each year I take something different from it as well. So you do make certain that you cater it and making certain that it fits into our strategic plan and making certain that you engage.
Yes.
I think seamlessly, more seamlessly than I've ever seen anyone do it with young people to the level where they're there. And they leave out of here remembering things that you talked about. So they'll talk about level up, show up, never give up. They'll talk about all those things.
And that is so important
for years
to me.
To come.
And I tell you, one of the reasons that I go as hard as I do, because unlike my classroom, I may not see them tomorrow. So this is my opportunity. This is my chance. Another reason is going back to what I saw when I did that school to prison pipeline, those interviews. When I was going through, I had just started doing some speaking as an undergrad with the Office of Diversity with Dr. Carol Hardy in Williamsburg. So she'd send me out on her behalf. I'd go with her. When I was going, there were some people that would see me and say, "Hey, Dr. Brown, you came to my school." When I was in the prison, doing the prison study, and my feelings were hurt. I felt like, well, what are you doing here? You heard me.
Right.
And, that just got my attention even to it. Like, I would often say, so what could I have said? What could I have done? And these young people really were authentic with me, and they said, well, Dr. Brown, at the end of the day, it was my choice. So I talk a lot about choices. Today I said, every decision you make has a future. The people you hang around matter.
Yes.
So all of those things that I heard when I was doing those interviews, I bring it back to say, hey, this is what we can try.
Absolutely. So you started with our commitment to graduate, I think around 6 years ago.
Yes.
So what were your thoughts when we initially contacted you and say, hey, we want you to speak to a group of ninth graders about committing to graduate on time in the next 3.5 years?
I said, this is the most progressive district I've heard of. You're talking about ninth graders and graduation when ninth graders don't know what's going to happen next week.
Exactly.
So it really just thrilled me that you're my neighbor,
Yes.
that I know so many of you, and you're doing such great work. I love that. I love the fact that I've seen the parent involvement
Right.
grow every year. This year,
And you engaged them this year, too, on a different level than what I've seen in previous years. And they were there.
That's right.
They were with it.
Oh, yeah. well, I had read some social media posts from some of the administrators about some of the kids' behavior at some games, and they were just concerned.
Right.
And again, I believe it starts at home.
Yes.
And I hope the listeners understand when I say it starts at home, it starts at my home too. Mm-hmm. And there's no such thing as a perfect child. No such thing as a perfect parent. Now, maybe perfect grandkids, but I'm but
that's what grandparents say.
That's right.
That's automatic.
That's right. But no such thing as perfect people, so to speak. So I've experienced almost everything you can think of when it comes to phone calls home. Mm-hmm. However, I know in my heart of hearts that teachers want what's best for my son or my daughter, and I'm there for it. And I want us to get back to that place where, do you remember when we were coming up, when if you saw your teacher out, that was a big deal.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
You go crazy.
Yes, stardom.
Right.
Like they were.
Right.
Movie stars.
Exactly. You eat Captain Crunch?
She had Cheerios.
Right. Right.
Just like me.
Right. So I want us, I think sometimes what the societal climate tends to invade other arenas. And I think as schools, we're better than that.
Yes.
No, we are the hope.
Yes.
And have been the hope.
Yes.
And I know that's happening here in Hampton.
Thank you so much. Now, Dr. Brown, you have a lot of accolades and accomplishments under your belt. What do you feel is your most important or valuable contribution that you give to others?
I'm one of God's many children.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's my most important.
That's powerful.
And please know that I understand that I am on a public education podcast.
I asked you that question. Not as a Hampton City School employee. So that's your answer.
Exactly.
And it's a powerful one too.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
That's and as a reminder, it's just so much that goes with that when I keep that first and foremost. The one, humility. You mentioned accolades. You're looking at someone who didn't think they were going to live past 18 because my person that I looked up to didn't.
Right.
So everything after 18 for me was a bonus. I mean, literally was a bonus.
Wow.
So the things that have happened and continue to happen, I wasn't smart enough to plan it. Now, guess what? Education was my foundation. Now, with that foundation, it was a springboard. I was out in Clark County's public schools in Nevada, Las Vegas, doing a huge summit, my brother's keeper, signing books after. Some people come up, they don't have any books in their hand. So, I shake their hands. And they say, hey, how come we don't know about you? And I'm looking at them thinking, well, I don't know you either. I didn't say that. But then they said, we'd like to give you our card. Gave me the card. Now, there's a long line. So I stick the card in my case. They think I'm brushing them off. They said, hold it. We'll take one of your cards. I was like, okay, it was great meeting you. I'm signing books. I get back to the office a week later. They say, hey, did you meet some executives from ABC Disney? I said, no. They said, well, we think you did. They were there to audition me for a show. So when they called me, it wasn't like, do you want to, like, you have to be casted. Right. They said, we saw you. Right. We want you for this. Education did that. I would not have been in that place in that particular time if it weren't for public education. So public education was definitely my foundation. And it has launched me into so many different things. And I just want young people to take advantage of that. Today I said education does not discriminate. It was important for me to say that.
Yes.
Education does not discriminate. That's there for you. If someone doesn't like me, guess what? I can still get an education. If I don't like them, I can still get an education. That's there for the getting.
So ABC.
ABC Disney. So the show is The Parent Test.
Yes.
I
still have it on my DVR, sir.
Okay.
I have watched not all the episodes. I got up to the episode where you had to teach that young man how to treat you.
You know what?
Sometimes we have to do that.
Not gonna say anything. but thank you for understanding what was going on there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I understood wholeheartedly. Can definitely relate. So you share some very important messages about parenting. I understand you have a lot of experience in parenting yourself.
Yes.
8 children.
Yes.
And how many grandchildren?
3.
3 grandchildren. Why do you think these practices are essential to raising a successful, well-rounded child?
Well, I tell you, we got to know our roles, first of all, as parents. And I say as parents, we guard and we guide. That's what we first start. We guard and we guide. That's what we do. Now we got to talk about the things that sometimes we do that aren't beneficial to our children.
Right.
We shouldn't be our children's friends. And when I say that, some parents take offense. Like, you can be friendly,
Right.
but you shouldn't be your child's friend, because then the hierarchy changes. So when you're friends, you're on the same level. And children don't know necessarily how to differentiate. So then when you have to discipline and you want to go back up, you're the friend. So how dare you? So you're disciplining. Sometimes you'll be treated by the child like a peer.
Exactly.
And that isn't a good thing. So that's one thing. Another thing that I talk about is not tethering yourself to your child's choices. Parents sometimes take it personally when our children do things. However, at the end of the day, they have choices, and they're going to make choices. The example I often give, my cousin Stephen, we're more like brothers than cousins. My Aunt Evelyn, his mom, and my Uncle Peter, when he made the choices that he did, you could go talk to them while he was away, and you wouldn't know that they had a son in prison because their life went on. Didn't mean he didn't love him. Didn't mean he didn't care about him. What it meant was we did our best.
Yes.
At the end of the day, he made choices. So what happens is you have children or parents that are screaming, yelling, happy, joyful when the children are doing great things, as if they were, responsible for it. But then when that child does something bad, they take it too. I say just don't tether yourself to it. Guard and guide. Just like teachers, we don't tell kids necessarily the best. We tell them not what to learn, but how to learn.
Right.
And then leave it there.
Wow.
So I think guard, guide, not be their friends. Don't tether yourself to their choices. And recognizing that schools can't do it alone. Children are master splitters. That's not necessarily a choice. That's just kind of who young people are, making sense of the world. So if I can do it with mom and dad, of course I'm going to do it with the teachers and my parents. It's important that we stay on the same page.
Yes, sir.
That's at the end of the day. It may be 2 teams, but we got one dream. Same page. And that's what I constantly talk about. There have been times that I felt like teachers with my own children were being a tad bit harsh. But guess what? My children didn't know it.
Yes.
So there's my wife and I, if the kids are talking and then my wife does some type of discipline that I don't agree with, I better not say it in front of the kids.
In front of them, right.
That's bedroom talk.
Right.
Like, well, hon, and it's how I say it too. There's no recipe for this. And I got to tell you, Dr. Haynes, that since I did that show, people stopped me in the airport. Hey, the guy from the Parent Test. and always ask me, what book should I read? What do you recommend? And I've gotten to the point where I say, buy the book with your child's photo on the cover.
Wow.
And I say that to say that you're the expert when it comes to your child. Stop looking outside.
Absolutely.
Stop looking outside. You know your child better than anybody, or should.
Yes, should. One of the things you also mentioned, Dr. Brown, is let your children go through the hard stuff.
Yes.
And I found myself not necessarily guilty of that, but thinking when my daughter, I have a 20-year-old daughter, she'll be 21 in June, but anytime she has gone through some difficult things or challenges in life, I'm constantly thinking, how could I have prevented that from happening? But they need to go through it.
Yes.
I think it helps to build and develop character and help them to see that this too shall pass and
Come
you
on.
will persevere. Yes, sir. But I hadn't thought about it that way until you said it today with the commitment to graduate presentation.
We got to stop stealing our children's heart. And where does that come from? The fact that many of us have struggled. But guess what? If you
don't want them to go through what you went
Exactly. But if you go back and you erase all those struggles, you've erased yourself.
Yes.
That's made us who we are. So when we do that to children, we are rearing children that are, I don't know, not as strong as they could be.
Right.
So that's really, really important that we don't steal it. I have 8 kids. I've sat back and watched some things that have hurt me. Literally how your parents used to say, it hurts me more than it hurts you.
Yes.
I watched one of my children really mess their credit up, knowing that that's not something easy that you come back from.
Right.
And I knew all I had to do was pay the bills. That's it. And my wife said, nope. Now I didn't say no first because I'm thinking it should be
especially
levels.
with a daughter.
Right.
Different with daddy's
That's
daughter.
right.
Yes,
Come
sir.
Come on. And all my daughters are daddy's girls. So I'm thinking, man, now I'm trying to like rationalize. Maybe there are levels to this. No. She said, no, they'll learn. They'll learn. And right now, that middle daughter is repairing her credit with her husband. They're saving money. And they do have enough for a down payment. But their rating, their interest rate is going to be crazy.
Yes.
But it's because of not listening. Had another son, had his car repossessed. All I had to do was give him the money. No. I wanted him to understand that somebody will come and take your car.
Yes.
I said, listen, the way you're going, every time you get out, you need to take everything you own with you. I gave him advice.
Don't leave anything in there.
You know what he said? He said, Dad, a guy came in at Chipotle where he worked years ago. He said he came in at Chipotle and said, asked all these questions about food or whatever. He came in while the other guy was taking his car.
They had the master plan.
He didn't get an alarm or anything. So guess what? I can tell you my children are better for it.
Right.
They're better for it. And I've just seen where when we do steal our children's heart, that's a sense of entitlement that they get. And for all the parents that are listening to the podcast, my definition of a sense of entitlement is when a child has lots of privilege and not too many consequences.
Wow.
And that's
makes a whole lot of sense.
And that's what we do sometimes.
Yes, sir. Dr. Brown, I may be a little bit biased, and some of my guests may shun me for saying this. This has probably been one of my favorite podcasts to date.
Well, I got to say the same thing because I always knew we were equally yoked.
Yes, sir.
It was just confirmed today.
Yes, sir. So, Doc, before we close out, is there anything else you'd like to share with the listening audience?
I would. I would like the listening audience to be as supportive as possible with Hampton City Public Schools, recognizing that I'd ask how many of the listeners have ever flown out of Norfolk, out of Hampton, Newport News, right, Richmond even.
Right.
Have you ever experienced turbulence?
Yes, sir.
Yes. On planes, you experience it all the time. Have you ever experienced delays? I have all the time. I've signed up to fly one place, an emergency took me somewhere else. So when I say that, did you get out of your seat, take your seatbelt off, and go up to the cockpit and let the pilot have a piece of your mind? Of course not. You stayed in your seat. So what I'm telling the listening audience to do is to always cheer for the pilot. There's going to be delays. There's going to be turbulence. But at the end of the day, you want the pilot to land the plane safely. Dr. Haynes, we're cheering for you.
I appreciate you, sir. Appreciate you. So thank you, Dr. Brown, for joining me today and sharing your insight and expertise. I'm sure our listening audience has thoroughly enjoyed our time together. I know I certainly have. And to our listeners, remember, education is the most powerful weapon you could use to change the world. As one community, one transformation, we will ensure academic excellence for every child, every day, whatever it takes. Catch you next week.
Listen to learn more about Hampton City Schools. New episodes of HCS Talks drop on Thursdays. Subscribe and listen to HCS Talks. HCS Talks is a Hampton City Schools production.